Welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. So glad that you're here. My name is Gina Gleason. I'm on staff here at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hill. I work for Pastor Jack Hibbs for almost 17 years now. And so we decided to start doing these Friday night monthly town halls to bring you some information about the really important issues that everyone's talking about. And so what's everybody talking about today? COVID, right? Wish we didn't have to talk about it, but we are. It's such an important part of our daily life. And we just thought it would be a great time to bring out a doctor who's going to give you the truth about what's going on, because there's just so much information, fake news, real news. How do you know what to believe? So today, Dr. Jeffrey Barke is going to give you some facts about what's going on with COVID. But before we begin our program, we're going to pray and give this night up to the Lord. So I've invited Pastor Lynn out to open us up in prayer. So please give him a warm welcome.
Father God, we are so thankful that those of us that are sitting in these seats and those that are listening online, and we thank you, God, that you give us an opportunity for God appointment. And God, we pray that every word that is spoken, God, you know what we need to hear, and we pray that we listen with our hearts, eyes to see and ears to hear, and the hearts to understand. But God, we need your wisdom. We don't need worldly wisdom tonight. We're here for godly wisdom. And so, God, we pray that this message touches our hearts, answers those questions that are important to you as well as to us. And then, God, we pray, let the words of our mouth and the meditation of our hearts tonight be acceptable in your sight, oh God, our rock and our redeemer. And we pray this in Jesus' name. And all God's children said, amen and amen.
Thank you, Pastor Lynn. Okay, so before we begin our program, I have a few announcements just to make sure that everyone is up to date, everyone knows what's going on, because this is all about making sure that you know what's going on today, because that is how we lead and live more productive and effective lives. Because there's information that you have to make a difference in our world today, because I believe that it's God's people who are going to make a difference in this country today. So let's talk about some of those things. Our legislative session here in California is up and running. In Sacramento, they're in the process of introducing legislation that will profoundly affect your life. And you need to know about what those bills are, because once it goes through the legislative process, it's going to become a law. And things that pass into law here in California, just like any other state, they're going to mandate and require you to do certain things whether or not you like them. So I'm going to suggest that you follow us, Real Impact, either on Facebook, signing up for our newsletter, follow us on Instagram, get our app, and make sure that you know what some of the current legislation is that's being introduced, because if you don't speak up, they're going to keep ruling our lives with a heavy hand. And we really need you to take action. Whenever Real Impact puts out an action alert, it's because it's important, because it's serious. We don't cry wolf. We are talking about really important things. And if you want to make a difference in the future of your country, for the lives of, not only your life, for the lives of your children and grandchildren, we really need you to take action. So please pay attention to that. Also, we are so excited because we're going to have a big pro-life conference here on Saturday, January the 29th. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's Love Life. And some of the best speakers in the country are going to be here. Pro-lifers who are going to have an excellent message about how you can make a difference in defending the unborn. So we hope that you can come out, visit our church website, and sign up and show up on the 29th and make a difference for the unborn. Also, I want to let you know that we have some tables in the foyer. If you did not see them, we have an election year coming up this year. We have a June primary, a November general election. You need to be registered to vote. You need to get current information about the elections. And Real Impact is going to be able to do that for you. So visit our table out in the foyer and find out what's going on and stay up to date on all of that news. And so that's it for announcements. And now I am going to introduce our guest speaker, but first I'm going to read a disclaimer. Absolutely necessary nowadays. So, all topics discussed tonight, including but not limited to vaccines, medicines, treatments, texts, and graphics, are for purely informational purposes only. Discussion tonight is not to replace your personal physician's medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek your personal physician before deciding to undergo a new health regimen, and do not delay in seeking medical help if you are in an emergency situation based upon what you have heard, read, or seen here. So that puts us in the clear. So, I am just so excited to have Dr. Jeffrey Barke with us today. I've known Dr. Barke and his wife, Mary, just being around Orange County and showing up at events, and they're always there. And they're just the most lovely people, very accomplished. You're going to be excited to hear what Dr. Barke says. And I know that we had also promised to have Mary Barke with us, but it's not going to happen after all. Something came up, and I'm going to let Dr. Barke explain why Mary could not be here tonight, even though she wanted to be here. It was a forced situation, so he'll talk about that a little bit more. And I know some of you wanted to hear more about education, but Dr. Barke has a pretty impressive resume himself when it comes to education, so let me read a little bit about that. Dr. Jeffrey Barke is a board-certified primary care physician in private practice for over 25 years. He completed his medical school and family practice residency at the University of California, Irvine. He has served as an associate clinical professor at USC Irvine and a board member of the Orange County Medical Association. Dr. Barke was recently commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Army Reserve Medical Corps. He is also a reserve deputy and a tactical physician for a local law enforcement SWAT team. Dr. Barke has also served as an elected official board member of the Los Alamitos Unified School District for 12 years and is the co-founder and current school board chair of a free public charter school in Orange County called Orange County Classical Academy that uses Hillsdale College's curriculum. Dr. Barke is the author of Covid-19, A Physician's Take on the Exaggerated Fear of Coronavirus. He is a sought-after speaker on the failure of government to educate and all things related to COVID-19. Dr. Barke is a proud founding member of America's Frontline Doctors. He is also the co-host of the podcast InformedDissentMedia.com, and his website is rxforliberty.com. So please give a very warm welcome to Dr. Jeffrey Barke.
Thank you. What do you guys want to talk about? Oh my God, I'm so intimidated. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be standing at Jack Hibbs' church. I've been here many times before, and boy, it's really overwhelming. I apologize that my wife can't be here, and I'll tell you a little bit about why. And thank you, Semi, for coming. Hi. Okay, I thought maybe I'd tell you a little bit about me if you don't know who I am and why I'm here. On paper, man, I sound kind of impressive, even to myself. But let me assure you, I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm just a dad and a father, guy who goes to work every day, takes care of patients. There's really nothing special about me. And I say that because I want you to know as you sit there looking for a way to contribute, to make a difference, looking for a way to get into the fight, because a fight we are in the middle of, that in your own way you can make a difference. And I'll share you my story, and hopefully you'll find some meaning in it, to have a little bit more courage, to push yourself past your comfort zone, to get in the fight with all of us. I never sought to be an activist physician. It's not what I do. It's not what I wanted to do. This started really early in the pandemic. I live in coastal Orange County, and this was about March of 2020. You might remember that time. Businesses were closed, churches were closed. County supervisors were trying to decide to open, to close, various mandates and so forth. My wife and I were invited out to Riverside. The Riverside County Board of Supervisors was meeting, and they were going to make a decision as to whether or not to open up their county. And there was a group that was holding a rally before that meeting on the steps outside the council chambers. So my wife came to me and said, "Hey, honey, you want to go to Riverside? There's this thing going on." And I said, "No. Why would anybody want to drive to Riverside?" Now, as you know, during normal times, this was during the week, I think it was a Wednesday, it's like an hour and a half drive to come from, Orange County all the way out to Riverside. And it was a work day, so I didn't want to go out to Riverside. Then she reminded me that Desiree Ferraro was holding this rally. And Desiree is a dear friend of ours. She's often in Orange County supporting the various causes that we're participating in. So being the good husband that I am, I said, "Yes, dear." And off to Riverside we went. I was dressed in scrubs because I was planning to go to work afterwards. And when we got there, there were several hundred people congregating outside the council chambers, the steps outside. They had microphones and a little stage and so forth. Was anybody there? Desiree said, "Hey, Barke, you want to say a few words?" Now, I'm not shy to speak. God gave me a gift to feel comfortable doing this. I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll say a few words." I didn't have anything prepared. And as I walked up onto the platform, I looked back at my wife and I said, "Hey, honey, take a couple pictures. It'll be fun to send the kids." My son at the time was working in DC. My daughter lives in Milwaukee. And like many of us parents, we often communicate by text messages or Snapchat, etc. So I thought it'd be fun to take a couple pictures to show the old guy up there saying a few words. So if you've got an iPhone like I do, you know how easy it is to hit the video button instead of the photo button. So I spoke for about 5 minutes. Then my wife and I are sitting around her phone. Text message, video too large. Email, file too large. So Desiree came up and said, "Oh, it's easy. Just post it on Facebook. The kids can see it there." Post. And a few minutes later, now it's up on Facebook. And almost immediately, I started getting communications from around the world. Freedom fighters, physicians, nurses were reaching out to me. Media, almost immediately, there was media out of Great Britain that called and messaged me and wanted to talk to me. What would talk to me for? And then I thought about it, and I always carry this around with me. This is a copy of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Now this copy that I carry around happens to come from Hillsdale College. And when I was on those steps, I held up the Constitution and I said, "This document was never designed to restrict we the people. This document was designed to restrict the government." And I guess that resonated with a lot of people. And as a result, here I am now being invited to Pastor Jack Hibbs' church to talk to you all. So if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. Shortly thereafter, I was introduced to a physician. You all know her or have heard of her. Her name is Dr. Simone Gold. And she started an organization known as America's Frontline Doctors. And she decided that the way to get our message out was to bypass mainstream media. Instead, let's go through the social media channels that actually have more people on there than the mainstream media. So she organized a summit of physicians in Washington, D.C. It was really designed as an educational conference for doctors. So we each spoke about our own level of expertise. Me, because I was in education, I spoke about kids and COVID in schools, and others spoke about different areas from vaccines and COVID treatment and so forth. So that was about a half day, and then she decided to bring us to the steps of the Supreme Court to hold a small press conference. Why the Supreme Court? Because it looks super cool. It's accessible to the public, unlike the U.S. Capitol. It's got that awesome feel of the granite and the pillars and so forth. And so we did that, and the videos that we recorded went viral. Millions and millions and millions of hits across the world. And a lot of us who have been outspoken now have gotten a lot of attention. That attention isn't always good, by the way. And some people say that I'm courageous. But I'll tell you, being courageous doesn't mean you don't feel pain. And it hurts when I'm called names on social media. Something recently happened, a social media post of mine that wasn't actually mine, that was a rather derogatory post that was assigned to me, and got blown up now on social media, even to the point that my charter school is being attacked and tagged. And our educational systems are being attacked and tagged. The Medical Board of California is being alerted, etc. I've been told that I shouldn't have a license anymore because I'm speaking out. When this first happened, I lost patience. When I first started speaking out, I lost patience. There were people that didn't like my politics. I don't talk politics in the office unless somebody asks my opinion. But patients found out, and they didn't like that, and they left. And that hurts, right? That hurts. I don't care who you are. That kind of sense of rejection really hurts. But the good news is, not too long after that, the floodgates opened, and the patriots started coming. My practice has never been busier in my career. As a matter of fact, I recently had to close my practice because it's just too full, and I'm in the process now of trying to hire a nurse practitioner or a PA. Is Tessa here? So a member of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, was at my office today. She's a PA. She works for Kaiser. And she's about to lose her job. You think I have courage? Here's somebody that's going to put it all on the line because of principles. Why is she about to lose her job? Because she doesn't want to be vaccinated. She wants to exercise her medical authority and her right to decide what she does with her body. Remember, my body, my choice? And she said, no, I'm good. No, I'm good. I actually recovered from COVID. I'm good. I don't want the vaccine. And now she's going to likely lose her job. That happened to my nurse, single mom, several months back. You think I'm courageous. Single mom puts it all on the line. Says, no, I'm not going to get vaccinated. Okay, well, we're going to test you. No, you're not testing me. We don't test healthy people. I'm not ill. You're not shoving that thing up my nose. I'm not going to be tested. And without knowing what she was going to do if she loses her job, she trusted that God had a plan for her. So about the same time she was being fired and showed the door, I posted on social media that I was looking for a nurse to come work for me. And somebody here at this church was a mutual friend of my nurse's and reached out to her and said, hey, you should take a look at this. And within a few weeks, we hired her, and now I've got a 17-year veteran Kaiser nurse who now works in an office that honors her medical freedom and her choice. So listen, maybe you guys probably don't know this, but I'll share it with you. My wife and I are Jewish. And unfortunately, you don't have to applaud that I'm a Jew. But I was backstage looking this up. I Googled it, checked Facebook, checked Instagram and Twitter, and guess what? Jesus is still a Jew. So unfortunately, my wife and I often feel more comfortable in evangelical churches than we do in many synagogues. We feel a warmth and a kinship of shared values here, and this is where I like being. So we started a new organization. It's called Jews for Evangelicals. What's so funny? There's 2 members. So you may remember that not long ago, about a year ago, so the churches were closed. Remember that? The churches were closed and marijuana dispensaries and liquor stores were open. What's that all about? But there was a handful of evangelical pastors that said, oh no, oh heck no. And one of those pastors was Pastor Jack Hibbs. And on May 31st, 2020, May 31st, 2020, that was Pentecost Sunday, Pastor Hibbs said, my church will be open. And my wife and I were sitting right here in the church. Then there's a pastor out in Thousand Oaks. You probably know him, Pastor Rob McCoy. And Rob McCoy said, my church is going to remain open. And you bring it if you think you're going to close it. And he picked a particular day where the police said they would be showing up and arresting people that attended that church. And my wife and I said, road trip. So with the big Orange County contingent, we went up to Thousand Oaks and we stood out there with thousands of people in front of Rob McCoy's church. And I'll never forget this. My wife had made this little sign and it said, synagogues are essential too. And there was somebody filming a documentary and I ended up on the documentary and they go, what are you guys doing here? I go, we have to stick together. Right. We're here to support Rob McCoy and I'm ready to get arrested. Now, fortunately, nobody got arrested that day, and Rob gave a beautiful sermon, and it was wonderful. And so, listen, I love name-dropping pastors, And I consider Jack Hibbs a friend, and Rob McCoy, Tim Thompson out in Marietta. So we really enjoy feeling like family inside evangelical churches. There's a quote that I heard, what's his name? Kirk Cameron. There's a quote that I was watching Kirk Cameron's fireside chats. Maybe you've seen him on Facebook. Has this big fire in his backyard, fire pit. Then he teaches from the Bible and has some inspirational thing, patriotic music. So Kirk and I have become friends. And I'm not disclosing anything that isn't public because he okayed me sharing it. Kirk is also now a patient. And he said something that really resonated with me at one of those fireside chats. And it's a quote by Neil Maxwell. And it says this, and you should listen to this. This is for all you that wonder how you can make a difference, how you can participate and be in the fight. God doesn't begin by asking us about our ability, but only about our availability. And if we then prove our dependability, he will increase our capability. Listen, I'm not a particularly religious guy, but I truly think God is working through me to be able to spread the truth, to be able to help people both in our country and around the world. And this is really what gives me the strength. Chesterton said, you can't break a person who gets their strength from God. You can't hurt a person who defines his worth from God. So as you heard, August 2020, we opened up our charter school. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Let's open up a charter school in the middle of a pandemic. What could possibly go wrong? My wife ran for the County Board of Education. I'm looking at the clock. We've got a countdown clock. We're good. And when she was running for the County Board of Education several years ago, I met an activist in Orange County. His name is Mark Bucher, my co-founder. And we got together and he shared a vision that he had about classical education. And I had a relationship with Hillsdale College because that's where my son goes. Hillsdale has a charter school movement across the country. It's called the Barney Charter School Initiative. Barney comes from Stephen Barney, who gave Hillsdale some seed money to start this program. And I met with Mark and I said, Mark, how tough could it be? Let's start this charter school. So the adventure started. And it's hard opening up a charter school. It's really hard. I had no idea how hard it is. 700-page document to meet all the education criteria. Present in front of the Orange Unified School District Board of Education. Fortunately, they had a charter-friendly board. Lots of drama, lots of arrows. And in December of 2019, after about a 5-hour meeting at 1:15 in the morning, our charter was passed by the Board of Education. Then we stood outside, and Mark and I looked at each other, and we said, holy, now what are we going to do? We didn't have a location. We didn't have a headmaster. We didn't have any teachers. We didn't know what we were doing. We actually had never done this before, and we had no idea what we were doing. Now, Mark is an evangelical and a man of faith, and I just believed that if there was a will, there was a way. So march forward we did. Long story short, we found a property that now is our permanent home because we had an investor that just bought the school where we're currently housed. And then God brought us Semi Park, who's sitting here, our headmaster. And is also a member of this church. Our church has remained open throughout this pandemic, and our kids are learning like never before, and we've got a 1,000-person waiting list that want to come to our school. Pastor Hibbs and I have talked peripherally about maybe we could bring something like that here. This county, of course, has its own drama as it relates to education and the school boards and how you get a charter school here, but at some point maybe we'll work on that. So my wife was supposed to be here tonight to talk specifically about education, but there's evil going on in education, and there are evil forces that are trying to prevent her and her board from doing what they're doing. And they're about to redistrict, which is their lawful right to do, where the individual board members are elected from. And then there's a county redistricting committee that decided to get involved and want to do something different. So many of our parents actually would have been here tonight, but are at that redistricting meeting to encourage that district, the redistricting committee, to do the right thing. So schools are really rough. It's been a difficult time for all of us that have kids in school. And I would encourage you, take a stand. Do not let your kids go to school with masks on. Do not allow your children to be vaccinated. So let's shift a little bit and talk about, I know what you kind of came here to hear me talk about, and that's COVID. I want to assure you that you should not have fear. I want to assure you that fear is the true contagion, not the virus. And the government and the mainstream media wants you to live in fear, because when you live in fear, you can be controlled. When you live in fear, they will force you to do many things that you otherwise wouldn't do. So please don't live your life in fear. This virus can hurt people, there's no question about it, but it's mainly the people that are in high-risk groups. And those are folks that have significant underlying comorbidities. Even the CDC recently came out and said 75% of all COVID deaths have at least 4 significant underlying comorbidities. Things like diabetes and heart disease and cancer and obesity and on and on and on. Even Emperor Fauci himself came out recently and said the majority of hospitalizations for COVID are not hospitalizations because of COVID, they're hospitalizations with COVID. Meaning you go in for some other reason, you go in for gallbladder surgery or a hernia or chest pain or whatever it might be, and as is the hospital protocol, whether you're ill or well, they test you. And these tests just simply are not accurate enough to be used the way they're being used. So now you go in with a broken hip and they test you and you test positive for COVID, even though you don't have any symptoms, and now you're a hospitalization for COVID. So don't let the media mislead you. When you hear these numbers that the hospitals are being overwhelmed with COVID, they're not. There are a lot of people in the hospital that has nothing to do with COVID, and they just happen to test positive. I don't even recommend testing anymore. You know, there's an expression in medical school that we're always taught. We don't treat test results, we treat patients. So I don't need a test to tell me how to treat you. And under no circumstances, in my opinion, should a healthy person that has no symptoms be tested. You know what it's the equivalent of? It's like me telling women, you need to go in and get your breast biopsied. No mammographic evidence, no lumps that you can detect, but we just want to make sure because breast cancer is very fearful. That's kind of what we're doing. We're over-testing. I saw lines of people, of cars, hours long. Reminded me of the Jimmy Carter era when people would line up to get gasoline. And these are healthy people sitting there in their cars with their car running for hours to be tested against a virus that they're not even at risk. Wow. Speaking of risk, why on earth would we vaccinate a child against an illness that they're not at risk with an investigational vaccine that has no long-term safety studies? Why would we do that? In my opinion, under no circumstances should we be vaccinating children. There's just too many unknowns with this messenger RNA vaccine to be putting it inside our children. But here's the reason why they're doing it. They have to do it. Under emergency use authorization, vaccine companies have immunity from liability. Under emergency use authorization, liability protection. If a vaccine is approved for an adult, the liability protection goes away. Under California law, If a vaccine is added to the childhood schedule, there's liability protection for the vaccine companies. So in order for those vaccines to be given to adults and approved for adults, they must first be given to children and approved for children, so the vaccine companies have liability protection. That's why they're coming after our children. And I do think that's evil. It just doesn't make sense that we should be doing this. In 1986, a law was passed by the US Congress and signed by the president that gave vaccine companies liability from all, protection from all liability. And what was supposed to happen is a reporting to Congress was supposed to happen regularly as to vaccine injuries, vaccine side effects, and so forth, but that never happened. But we do have a vaccine injury site that has reported vaccine injuries, and that's called the VAERS site, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS. This is not some crazy right-wing site run by some QAnon people, right? This is a site that's run by the government. It's run by the Biden administration, CDC, and FDA. Yet they discount this site. There's been over 17,000 deaths associated with this vaccine. Now, this isn't causation, it's correlation, but these things need to be investigated. And by the way, under penalty of law, you are reporting to this system. So if I report fraudulently, I could be arrested and fined for doing so. It's also difficult to report into this system. It takes a long time to register, to log in, to make a report, and so forth. Not to mention the numbers of injuries and side effects that are occurring as well. Now, I'm not anti-vax, but I am pro-choice. And I think it's important that anybody that gets a vaccination should have informed consent. What are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the potential complications? And then you can decide as an adult whether you want to participate. But that's not what's happening now. You're being coerced. You're being bribed. You're being forced, like those Kaiser employees, for fear of losing their job. And many of them aren't as courageous, and they say, okay, my job is more important than my own body, and so I'm going to get the vaccine. But there are some courageous nurses and doctors that are standing up. And so whether it's your business that you're being forced to be vaccinated against your will, or somebody that you know, encourage them and stand up with them. Stand and fight with them. If we all stand up together, these vaccines will go away. We can't comply our way out of tyranny. Our compliance allows the tyranny to continue. Emergencies have always been the pretext on which the safeguards of individual liberty have been eroded. And once they are suspended, it is not difficult for anyone who has assumed such emergency powers to see it that the emergency will persist. That's F.A. Hayek. He's the guy that won the 1974 Nobel Prize in Economics and wrote the book, The Road to Serfdom. We're seeing that and living that now as Governor Newsom extends the state of emergency, extends the mandatory indoor mask mandates. We're seeing that now, and we can't comply our way out of it. We have to stand up. It's time for peaceful civil disobedience. We must stand up to this. Let me shift a little bit and talk about COVID specifically and treatment. And then we'll take a time out, and Gina and I are going to have a conversation. The virus is very easy to treat. It's not difficult at all, but nobody's talking about it. We know that there's a direct correlation between low vitamin D level and bad outcome for COVID-19. If you did nothing else but measure your vitamin D and make sure it's in the upper level of normal, you'll be in a pretty good shape. If you do nothing else but have a nose, throat rinse protocol with dilute betadine or hydrogen peroxide and have that at the ready as soon as you get symptoms, you'll be better off and you'll reduce the symptoms and the duration of the illness. About 6 ounces of water and a splash of betadine, that's povidone iodine or hydrogen peroxide, squirt bottle, snort it up, spit it out, wash it down maybe with a little Listerine or Scope to get the taste out of your mouth. Do that if you're at a super spreader event and you're worried that you've been exposed, or start that immediately at the first sign of symptoms. If you did nothing but that, we could save lives and prevent hospitalization. But there's more we can do. And Dr. Fauci and company should be standing up on the tallest buildings, shouting this at the top of their lungs. Early treatment works. I have never in my career seen an infectious disease where the treatment recommendation is stay at home, isolate, and if you feel like you're gonna die, show up to the hospital and we'll help you die by giving you remdesivir. I've never seen that happen before. Early treatment works. Vitamin D, nose-throat protocol. We have repurposed medications, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, inhaled budesonide. These products work, especially if we can get to you early. And now we have monoclonal antibodies, and those can be very effective. But guess what? The government now has gotten into the distribution business. So of course they're in short supply. There are some newer drugs that have been approved that are made by Pfizer and other companies. One is called Paxlovid. Listen, I'm perfectly happy to have more tools to help me treat you. So the more the merrier. But we need to start talking about early intervention, not vaccinating our way out of this pandemic. And here's the problem, and I'm gonna leave it at this. All these variants that we see coming out. I think there's a reason for these variants, and it's not what you think. This is not a pandemic of the unvaccinated. More and more, we're seeing vaccinated people getting ill. I have a dear friend that works at CHOC, Children's Hospital of Orange County, and I'm on a text chain with her, and she was kind of laughing about this, that she was called into work, she's unvaccinated, because so many of the vaccinated nurses were out sick. And she was with a crew of 4 unvaccinated workers, unvaccinated nurses that were working in the ICU. And she said, what an irony. We can't vaccinate our way out of this pandemic, and the more we try, the more we're gonna see immunologic pressure on the virus to mutate around these vaccines, because that's what viruses do. They wanna live. They ideally don't wanna kill the host so they can continue to live. So as we massively vaccinate in the middle of the pandemic, we're putting pressure on this virus to mutate. And we'll see more mutations. You can count on it. You can count on it like the governor extending this emergency.
Yeah, that's right.
So my message to you, if there's one thing I want to impart, that is, don't be afraid. Please don't be afraid. If you go on my website, RX4Liberty, RX4FORLiberty.com, I've got that nasal throat recipe on there under COVID treatment. I have a link to physicians that do telemedicine that you can get in contact with. There's a great curated site called earlycovidcare.org. It's on my website, you don't have to write it down, but earlycovidcare.org, and it curates multiple websites where there's a listing of doctors in your area that are willing to prescribe some of these early treatments, or telemedicine doctors that you can get in contact with. So we all live in California here, at least that are here locally. I know this is being broadcast around the country. But in California, we're always taught to prepare for the big one, the earthquake. Have water, have food, know how to turn your gas off. Be prepared so when the big one hits, you can take care of your family. Same thing with COVID. Be prepared, not scared. And the things you can do to be prepared Or find a doctor before you need it. It's so scary to have symptoms and you know you have COVID and you don't know who to turn to for medical care. Find that person before you need help. Whether it's a telemedicine doc or it's a local doc that will treat you with early treatment. Get the medications that you know you'll need, whether it's ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or inhaled budesonide. Talk to a doctor about getting these medicines at home, so if COVID comes calling, you're not panicking because you don't know what to do. Be prepared, not scared. And if you do that, then you can walk around proudly, you can walk around self-assured, you can walk around without fear, knowing that you have early treatment. I've treated hundreds of patients for COVID in all risk categories, all age groups. And if you can get to people early, regardless of the risk category, most people do really, really well. And if you're in that high-risk group, you got diabetes, heart disease, you're overweight, then do the things to correct those comorbidities to put yourself in a lower risk group. It's important. You're in charge of you. Get some exercise. Get some sunshine. Show up here to church and pray, and be prepared, not scared. So I'm going to take a minute to walk back, grab Gina. We're going to come out in a couple chairs, talk to you all, answer some questions, and then I'll be sticking around too if you want to come up and talk to me afterwards. So thank you for the honor of coming here, and I'll be with you in just a minute.
Was he not awesome, you guys? Well, thank you, Jeffrey. That was just remarkable. I'm sure that people heard things that they may have not ever heard before and received help that they didn't know about. So that's one of the main reasons we wanted you to come out, to encourage people to not to be fearful and to offer some real help. And I just thank you so much for that. We have put out a request to the public to send in some questions. And so we're going to go through some of those questions. We had questions for Mary, but I think I'm going to have to let you take some of them. But the thing is, he's going to know the answers, so that's okay too. So let's start with the first question. Is COVID here to stay? Are we going to be dealing with it for the rest of our lives? What should we expect with it?
Well, I'll tell you, if the media and government had their way, I think COVID is here to stay. Listen, my belief is this is not a natural virus. I truly believe that this virus was created in the Wuhan virology lab using gain-of-function research. I think the evidence is showing that. This is nonsense that it came from a bat or the wet market. The only question I have that isn't clear yet is, was this released purposefully or was it released accidentally? And we may never know because the Chinese Communist Party will never cooperate with that investigation. So I think the virus, the natural cycle of these kind of viruses as they mutate is to get less and less virulent, so less dangerous as time goes on. So I have a feeling it's going to be with us, but just as this new variant Omicron is milder than Delta was, I think whatever the next variant that comes along will likely be even milder. And as time goes on, we'll learn to live with it, just like we learned to live with influenza.
Okay, good answer. But tell us the difference between the flu and COVID and some of the symptoms that people are experiencing.
Well, I'll tell you, the CDC has told us that the early PCR tests could not differentiate between COVID and influenza. And so a lot of these COVID cases that were marked, a year ago when we heard that influenza disappeared and we were only seeing COVID, I think were actually influenza. Symptoms are very similar. Viral symptoms, body aches and chills and fever, cough, etc. So influenza, the illness, is very similar to COVID, the illness. And so it's hard to differentiate, and you can't always differentiate, which, by the way, is why I don't think testing is particularly helpful. I'm going to treat you for your symptoms based on how you present. I don't need a Q-tip up your nose to tell me what's going on. And I think all this testing that we do just creates more unnecessary fear. I mean, I have patients now, and it's hard to teach them differently, even my patients. They wake up with a stuffy nose and they want to immediately come in and get tested. And you can't find test kits. So there's this mad rush and short supply of test kits. And I tell them no, and especially the ones that have no symptoms. Well, I'm going over to so-and-so's house and they want everybody tested. I'm like, that's ridiculous. People without symptoms don't transmit the virus. Dr. Fauci has told us this. I mean, have you ever caught a cold from somebody that doesn't have a cold? If you're not sneezing and coughing, you're not going to transmit this virus. So if you feel well, you're not at risk of getting somebody else sick. I mean, what's wrong with us? What are we doing? But yet, so many people are wanting to test. I had a patient today. She's got COVID. And I talked to her on the phone earlier. And I called her up because I got a lab report that a test was positive. I called her up and I said, hey, how you doing? She goes, well, I'm waiting for my test result. I go, well, didn't you do some home tests? Yes, I did 3 home tests and they're all positive. Well, why'd you do the second home test? Well, I wanted to make sure it was accurate. Well, why'd you do the 3rd home test? Well, I'm just a little OCD and I just wanted to double check. Well, why'd you come into my office and do the 4th test? Well, that's a PCR test. I thought it was more accurate. So this is not unusual. I know it's funny, but this is not unusual thinking. We've been taught now. We've been taught to be fearful. My co-host of our podcast, if you ever listen to the podcast, it's a lot of fun. It's called Informed Dissent. And it's on all the podcast channels, Apple Podcasts, and so forth. My co-host is a psychiatrist in LA. His name is Mark McDonald. He's a lot smarter than I am. He's super smart. And he just wrote a book called The United States of Fear. How we've been, indoctrinated by a mass psychosis, a mass delusional psychosis. We've been taught to be fearful, and then the government and the media continues that process. And they're reinforcing that process. It's like somebody with OCD. You know, if you know anybody that has OCD, they have to wash their hands 18 times, check that the door is locked 10 times before they can leave the house. It's the same thing. We're being taught that way. You know, I have to do a test. I have to do a test. Oh, no, where do I get more tests? I have to do a test. It's insane. I can't remember what the question was.
Good answer anyway, right? Okay, so you mentioned the PCR test. And you're telling people they don't need to be tested, but that's like the big talk nowadays. You know, the president is sending out tests all over the country. You can get free tests, and there's lines and all that kind of stuff. So why are there 2 different tests, and why is one supposedly better than the other, and what's the deal about the test?
The deal about the test is the public is buying into this delusional psychosis that testing and vaccinations and masking is the way forward. It's not. So the home test is an antigen test. So it's detecting a protein that's in the virus. They're reasonably accurate. We do these tests for like home pregnancy tests and things like that. They're pretty accurate. They're not perfect. And then the PCR tests are very problematic. They were never designed to be used diagnostically. And the PCR polymerase chain reaction, it's measuring genetic material from dead virus. So it's not even telling you whether you have an active virus or just residual dead genetic material in your nose. And the problem is the mechanism by which this test is done. It's called cycle threshold. It's like a picture that you keep magnifying. So they magnify the genetic material over and over and over and over again until it tests positive. And early on, we were using a cycle threshold of like 40 or higher, when the test really shouldn't be any higher than 25. So when you go in and get a PCR test, you need to know that. What are you using for the cycle threshold? And if it's any higher than 25, I don't believe the result. And these tests are notoriously inaccurate, both false positives and false negatives. And so that's really the basis of the two tests. So please don't test yourself if you have no symptoms. And don't be scared if you have mild symptoms. Be prepared, not scared. Start immediately on a nose, throat, rinse protocol. Look on my website. The recipe is there. You don't even need to look on my website. 6 ounces of water, a little splash of hydrogen peroxide. Squirt it up your nose, spit it out your mouth. If it burns a lot, dilute it more. It shouldn't burn. Maybe a little, you'll feel a little tingling. Dilute it if it's burning. And do that if you're worried. Do that with a common cold. This stuff kills virus. Hydrogen peroxide or betadine is virucidal. It kills viruses. So a lot of people do this anyways. My wife does this routinely with saline because she used to get sinus infections. A lot of people use neti pots to clean out their sinuses. It's a thing. And it should be a thing with this virus as well.
Okay, so let's say a person has had COVID and they have natural immunity. Explain what that actually means and why is our government refusing to accept natural immunity?
When I was a kid, I had chicken pox. And the reason why I had chicken pox was my mom took my brother and I down the street to the neighbor's kid's house who had chicken pox. That's what we did, right? And so, we got chicken pox and whatever, and oatmeal baths and calamine lotion, the whole bit. And then, a week goes by and we're back to school. This was way before we even had chicken pox vaccines. And recently, I tested myself. I wanted to see, wonder if I still have immunity to chicken pox. Sure enough, I still have high titers to chicken pox. This is 50 years later. So we believe that the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it's a type of coronavirus, when you get infected with this, you're going to have long-lasting immunity. Peter Mccullough, arguably one of the leading COVID experts in the country, maybe even in the world. By the way, we've interviewed him twice on our podcast. Really fun interviews. He's super smart. This was maybe a month ago, and he said, one and done. Once you've recovered from COVID, you're done. You're not going to get COVID again. Now, Omicron kind of threw us for a curve. So you can get Omicron if you have natural immunity, but the Omicron is more like a natural immunity boost. It's very likely to be mild, like a bad cold for a handful of days, and that's going to further boost your immunity. I have a lot of patients that remember getting sick the end of 2019, early 2020. They were really sick with what they thought was the flu. We didn't know about COVID at the time, and now we test their blood, and sure enough, they have COVID antibodies. Or if we can't detect the antibodies, there's another aspect of our immune system called T-cell immunity, and you can test for that as well. And that also imparts immunity from the variant. So the belief is if you have natural immunity, you recovered from COVID, at worst, if you get Omicron, it's going to be mild. And if you do get Omicron, it's very unlikely you're going to get Omicron again, and these new variants you should be protected from. So we think that, obviously it's new, so we don't know, but the belief is of many of the epidemiologists, at least the ones I listen to, that this natural immunity should be long-lasting. And you're right, why aren't we counting natural immunity? We know we can't count vaccine immunity. There are lots of people I know that are vaccinated that are getting sick, and some of them, not just mild illness, but severe illness. So if we're going to differentiate between anything, it should be immunity or no immunity. And the immunity group, fine if you want to count vaccine immunity, but we also need to count natural immunity too. And I hope we get to that point.
So you mentioned that you can find a doctor on your website that would be helpful in treating people with COVID. Tell us about these doctors. Are they all over the country? Are they regular MDs? Are they in threat of losing their licenses? Or what's going on with these doctors that are online?
They are all over the country. It's estimated that there's about 250, 300 doctors that are part of America's frontline doctors that do telemedicine. Peter Mccullough has suggested that this small group of doctors has taken care of something like 25 to 30% of all COVID cases in the United States. There's not enough of us. We're recruiting for new doctors that are willing to provide telemedicine services. So if you go to that site, earlycovidcare.org, you can find it on my website. There's a link to it. This curates multiple organizations together. Doctors that do telemedicine. You can search by zip code in your own area if there's a doctor locally that will prescribe for early treatment. So find those folks before you need those folks. Start with your own doctor. Hey, doc, if I get COVID, are you comfortable with early treatment? What do you mean by that? That ivermectin stuff, that horse dewormer. And if the doctor says no, we'll move on. Ask your friend or family member who had COVID and maybe got treated, where'd you get your treatment from? And then reach out to that person to get the medication that you need so you're not panicking to try to find it. Unfortunately, most commercial pharmacies, this is evil and this is disgusting. Most commercial pharmacies, Rite Aid, CVS, Walgreens, Save-On, etc., refuse to dispense ivermectin. I just spoke to a freedom-fighting pharmacist at a CVS out in the San Fernando Valley. She contacted me through social media. We had a nice conversation. I go, are you allowed to prescribe ivermectin? She said, well, they leave it at the discretion of the pharmacist, but we really have to have a solid reason behind it. Otherwise, we get punished. Otherwise, we could lose our job. And she's looking for a new pharmacy to go work for that values freedom and values freedom of choice. It's easier for me to prescribe you OxyContin, to prescribe you Vicodin or Percodan, than it is for me to prescribe you ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. And I used to have these conversations with pharmacists. My wife would stand there listening. I tried to be polite. Why won't you prescribe it? Well, there's no studies that da-da-da. Well, it's not approved. I go, no, it actually is approved. It's approved for a lot of uses. We use products off-label all the time, every day. Something like 20% of every prescription written in the United States is written for off-label purposes. So why won't you allow this? Well, it's dangerous. Oh, in your career, how long have you been a pharmacist? 28 years. In your 28 years, have you seen a single overdose from ivermectin? Well, in your 28 year career, have you seen a single person injured from hydroxychloroquine? Well, So, listen, it's a waste of my time to do that now. So we were able to identify the pharmacies that will prescribe. There are it's usually the mom and pop pharmacies or the compounding pharmacies. Mm-hmm. And some of these folks reach out to me on social media. Hey, Barke, I got your back. I'll help you out. Call me. I'll mail prescriptions wherever you need it. Literally, there's a Patriot in San Diego that reached out to me, a compounding pharmacy. So they're out there, and sometimes it's your local mom and pop pharmacy. Call around. Joe Bob's Pharmacy on the corner, call them up. Hey, will you guys dispense ivermectin? Now you have a place, now you just need a doctor.
So are you saying that the compound pharmacies are more willing?
They're more willing, yeah, usually, because they're run with a different attitude. The people that are working in compounded pharmacies, those are the ones that are giving bioidentical hormones to women, that are doing different thyroid things to help patients, that are having a more natural approach to the practice of medicine. And those are folks that honor medical freedom as opposed to the retail pharmacies. God, some of these retail pharmacies, it's unbelievable. First of all, it takes sometimes 10 minutes to finally get somebody on the phone, and it's typically, hi, we're really busy, can you hold please? Click, and then the on-call music. You're like, oh, please. And then the pharmacist, who's busy as all get up, no, I'm sorry, the pharmacist is giving vaccines right now. Can you call back in 15 minutes? So I literally stopped using them. I have a handful of go-to pharmacies. I direct all my prescriptions, not just COVID prescriptions, high blood pressure, cholesterol, whatever it is. I said, forget it. I'm stopping using you guys. Your customer service is terrible. You don't value medical freedom, so I'll send my business elsewhere. And these other pharmacies are fantastic. There's one pharmacy, I don't know if it's out here, it's called Now RX. They're a delivery-only pharmacy. They don't have a brick and mortar. And they honor medical freedom. You call them up, call in a prescription, you call them up, the very first prompt is, hi, welcome to Now RX. If this is a doctor, press 1. Oh, thank gosh. For Spanish, press 2. For Vietnamese, press 3. You press 1 and immediately, hi, this is pharmacist so-and-so. How can I be of help? Oh, hi, Dr. Barke. So nice to talk to you today. What patient needs help today? It's like a business that cares about service. Gosh, and these retail pharmacies just think that they have the market cornered and people don't have choices. You do have choices.
Still talking about pharmacies, when you mention vitamin D and other supplements, do people need pharmaceutical grade supplements, or can they get these at the Walmart or
Get them
Costco?
at your favorite vitamin store or even on Amazon. It's hard to harm yourself with vitamin D. I always recommend you measure it first and then take the appropriate amount. Generally, that's around 5,000 international units a day. It's cheap, super cheap, little teeny pills, easy to swallow. So vitamin D is so important, maybe one of the most important supplements, especially during COVID time. Cheap to measure it too, cheap and simple. Any doctor's office can do it. LabCorp, Quest, any commercial lab, they all do this. And the other supplements that I recommend on my website as well, but vitamin D, zinc. Zinc disrupts viral replication. If you get COVID, escalate the zinc to a higher level, about 100 milligrams a day. Vitamin C. I love those little emergency packets. You pour them into water, they taste good. You get 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C. So I think that's important as well. Even melatonin. Melatonin, not to help you sleep, although it may do that. Melatonin has immune modulating properties and can act as an anti-inflammatory. If you look at the FLCCC website, Frontline COVID Coalition something, website by Dr. Pierre Corey. He has an actual protocol, outpatient treatment of COVID. You can print it out. FLCCC.org. You can print it out. You can look at it. You get COVID, you can bring it to the doctor and say, will you please follow this? And it lists supplements. It lists ivermectin and some other interesting medications. Fluoxamine, Luvox. What's that? It's an older generation antidepressant primarily used to treat obsessive compulsive disease. It works in COVID. It helps reduce inflammation, can reduce hospitalization. The beauty of this FLCCC website is it's referenced. Here are the studies to back up the recommendation of using X, Y, and Z. It's fully referenced as well. And so the earlycovidcare.org brings together multiple sites with protocols, including Pierre Corey's protocol, which is the primary one I look towards to kind of guide me, and then I use variations of the theme.
And how long should we be taking these supplements? I mean, is this a lifelong thing, or is it just for 30 days and build some immunity up, or how long are
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think some of these supplements are good just to be taking independent of COVID. Like vitamin D is, even before COVID, was one of the supplements that I recommended most often. In my practice, we routinely measure vitamin D just as part of an annual exam. And it's amazing how many people have low vitamin D levels because we've been taught to fear the sun. Can't go outside, SPF 300, slather on your sunscreen, stay away from the sun.
How much sun do they need every day?
Like 10 or 15 minutes in 11 o'clock sun is really all you need. But we wear sunscreen when we go out, we wear long sleeves. Vitamin D is so critical for mental health, for cardiovascular health, for the protection of cancer, and your vitamin D level being below normal. I see it almost every single day. I look at it and go, oh my gosh, you've got like vampire level of vitamin D. Oh, I know. I had skin cancer once, so I never go in the sun. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. So, okay, fine, we've prevented some skin cancer, but at what cost? We never ask that question. How come? At what cost? What are the consequences of telling our kids to wear masks all day long? Whoa, stops. It doesn't stop anything. It's not my opinion. These are the opinions of every healthcare expert right up until, early in the pandemic. The New England Journal of Medicine, Dr. Fauci himself, the World Health Organization, the Surgeon General, on and on and on told us respiratory, surgical, and cloth masks do little, if anything, to prevent the spread of respiratory disease. My wife and I fly a lot because kids live, back, Milwaukee, and now my son's back at Hillsdale College, so we got to fly to go see him. That's the only time I'll wear a mask. And whenever I get on the plane, first of all, I always look left into the cockpit. I want to know who's flying the thing. And if I'm allowed to, I try to, give the pilot a fist bump and say, hold the line, right? Some of these pilots are being very strong and courageous with some of these vaccine mandates, so I want to give them a little love. And guess who's not wearing a mask on the airplane? The pilots. What the heck is that all about? So the two guys in the front of the plane that are flying it, or girls or whoever, they don't have masks on. Recirculated air, somehow that now new barrier locked door somehow stops COVID from spreading. How come they don't have to wear a mask and all us turkeys in the back have to have a mask on? And as if I'm sitting 6 inches away from somebody with my cloth mask on, like that's going to prevent me from getting COVID? We've lost our mind. Mark is right. Mass delusional psychosis. And we're all in part guilty of this. It's insane.
Well, that's the buzzword right now, mass delusional psychosis.
That's right.
Have you all been hearing about that?
Read Mark's book. It's paperback. It's thin. It's really easy. United States of Fear. It's a wonderful book. Take a look at my book, too. It's kind of fun. COVID-19, a physician's take on the exaggerated fear of coronavirus. Early in the pandemic, I started just writing essays. It's a way I just sort of, rather than screaming at the world, I sit down. I wrote an essay about my experience on the airplane where this poor little guy, this poor man dragging his kids along, his mask slipped down, and this idiot, crossed the aisle, put your mask on, put your mask, and he's got these kids, his mask is sliding down. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I wrote an essay about that. So I wrote a bunch of these essays, and then my father-in-law, who is in the publishing business, said, hey, we should put it together as a book. I'm like, all right, that'd be kind of cool. So we're about to release the 5th edition. So I update the essays, I add essays, and it's been a lot of fun. I've been honored. I got Dennis Prager to write the foreword to my book. And the sage Larry Elder wrote a little blurb on the book, too. So it's been a lot of fun, so that you might enjoy that. It's on Amazon, but if you want to bypass Amazon, you can get it directly through my publisher on my website as well.
Okay, so that sounds like something we all need to buy because, we're always looking for more information. But now let's switch the topic a little bit more to the doctors and to the nurses that are, I guess there's policy changes now. They're saying that these nurses and doctors who do test positive can actually go in. What's that all about? And
what it's all about is a staffing shortage. So my nurse friend that's at CHOC, Children's Hospital of Orange County, ICU nurse, I mean, all these nurses and doctors are going out. Almost all of them are vaccinated, of course, but they're still getting sick. So, the CDC said, well, listen, we need the people there. So you're going to get fired if you're not vaccinated, but if you're sick, you can go back to work. Just wear a mask. Now the reality is masks can work, right? An N95 mask. So my local hospital, a couple times a year, has mask fittings for people that work in the hospital and have to go into sick patient rooms. It's usually done by a nurse, and you go there. I've done this before. It's been many years. And there's several different sizes. They fit it to your face. They teach you how to wear it. Squeeze the thing over your nose. Pull it back, around your ears and so forth. And then equally important, they teach you how to take the mask off. Because if you're exposed to something, you don't want to now, manhandle your mask and so forth. So if you are working in the hospital and you go into an infection room, whether it's COVID or something else, you're not just wearing a mask, by the way. You're wearing one of those little beanies on your head, to cover your hair. You've got a gown on. You've got gloves on. You walk into the room. You do your thing. You examine the patient. You walk out of the room. And now there's a proper mechanism to take off the protective equipment. So you take off your mask. And what you don't do with that mask that you just took off is slide it over your forearm. You don't stick it in your back pocket. You don't hang it over your rearview mirror. You take the mask off and you put it in the hazardous waste bin. So you're telling me that kid who's going to wear a cloth mask all day long, sneezing and coughing and exchanging it with their friends and on the face, off the face, touching it and down, you're telling me that's going to offer any level of protection? We've seen the highest suicide rate we've ever seen. We've seen the highest level of depression we've ever seen in our children. We've seen mental health problems just crazily. We've seen learning disorders because those poor kids, not only can they not bond with their friends, they can't see facial expressions from their teachers. I agree with my co-host, Mark McDonald. Forcing a child to wear a mask is a form of child abuse, and we shouldn't do it.
So my understanding is that this legislative year, we're going to face legislation coming out of Sacramento that is going to require our children to be vaccinated.
Could very well be. I'm expecting that to occur.
Right. What do we do about that?
Leave the government schools. Stop calling them public schools. They're government-run schools. I'm lucky I don't have little kids that are in the school system. My wife and I have talked about this. If we had little kids, there's no way in heck they would be in any government school. We'd either be homeschooling them, they would be in a private school that shares our values, or they would be in a charter school that shares our values. But the traditional public school system is dead. Not only are we not educating our kids, we're indoctrinating our kids, we're over-sexualizing our kids, we're teaching them things that aren't true, and we've got to stop doing this. And the best way to stop doing this is you parents and grandparents, you have to pull your kids out of those schools. And if you're not going to do that, then run for the school board. A whole bunch of years ago when my kids were little, a group of parents were very frustrated by what was going on in our elementary school. And we decided that the only way we could make a change was make a change at the top. And I drew the short straw, and I decided to run for school board. I'd never been elected to anything. So all the mama bears in the community got together and acted on behalf of me. And holy crap, I won the election. And then 12 years later, the unions didn't like me. Los Alamitos Unified School District, one of the top, whatever that means, school district in the county. What does that mean? Well, at the high school, 45% of our kids were below grade level in math. This is not downtown, in some slum area. These are very affluent communities of Seal Beach, Rossmore, Los Alamitos. How possibly could 45% of our kids be below grade level? So I said, I've got an idea. Why don't we create a financial bonus pool for the teachers? Do a benchmark at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, at the end of the year. The teachers that made the greatest gains get financially rewarded. No, Barke, you can't do that. Why not? Uniform compensation system. Teachers have to all be paid the same. Okay, fine. How about this? Why don't we prevent kids from doing after-school activities like playing on the football team or basketball team or being a cheerleader unless they're up to grade level in math? And we'll help them. We'll give them tutoring. No, you can't do that. Why not? Because some of the kids would drop out of high school if not for playing sports. All right. How about this? Why don't we give every kid a voucher? We have all these, Mathmasium and Kumon and these tutoring centers around. Let's give every kid a voucher and allow them to go twice a week until they're up to grade level. How about that? No, Barke, you can't do that. Why not? Because that would imply that our own teachers aren't capable of teaching the kids. It's like, hello, is this thing on? So the teachers union ran a former teacher against me. They outspent me about 10-1. They had teams of union members that would walk the district, and I ended up losing by about 15 votes. But God had bigger plans. If not for that loss, I would never have founded Orange County Classical Academy. So our goal is to grow the school and put charter schools throughout Orange County, and God willing, we'll be able to do that one school, one building, one classroom at a time.
So back to Governor Newsom and legislation that's going to be coming out of Sacramento. What can an individual school district do to fight back with this new legislation?
Well, hopefully the boards can fight back, and if you have a freedom-loving board, they can pass resolutions like my school did. We passed a resolution saying that we will not mandate vaccines for our children, and Sacramento sent us back a very nice letter in response. So they can do that, but ultimately, if it comes down where they're about to pass a bill to mandate a COVID-19 vaccination for our children, I would expect that we should have hundreds of thousands of people descending upon Sacramento saying we will not put our kids at risk. And if enough of us stand up and enough of us say, if you do this, my child will no longer be in a government school, then they will change the rules, because with your child comes the education dollars. And if your child isn't in school, they won't have the money, the unions won't get funded, and those schools will close down.
Yes. And this is where you all come in, because as these bills get introduced, they'll be given a bill number. They'll be given votes. The legislators will take votes through the policy committees that they have to go through. If you sign up for the Real Impact Action Alerts, you are going to get notified when these bills are up for a vote. You're going to be asked to call your assembly member or your senator and make sure that you tell him or her that you want him or her to vote no on these bills. That's the only way this is going to be cut off. It has to be in the committee process when it gets to the floor of the Senate or the Assembly, but we need to speak up, because they are going to listen to you if there's hundreds and thousands of people speaking up. If you aren't saying anything, they're going to do whatever it is they want to do.
Absolutely. You must
right?
speak up.
You understand? You think that your one vote, your one phone call is not going to make a difference? You are totally wrong. We have been able to fight back. This past year, 2 bills that were called a gut and amend, I know it's a technical term, but we were able to fight back 2 important bills that were going to mandate vaccines for employers and just to go into a building. And we fought them back because people spoke up. We're going to need even more this year. This year is going to be one of the worst legislative years I have ever seen. So don't hesitate to fight back. We need your help. So any closing statements, Dr. Barke?
So I hope I've given you some ideas and maybe a little bit more courage to push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Something as simple as showing up at your local school board meeting, even if you don't speak, but just showing up is important. And maybe after you go a couple, 3 or 4 times, and you see the process by which speakers can speak, then you'll have the courage to go up and speak your mind. They're your elected officials. These are your schools. Your tax dollars are paying for them. So you should have a right to voice your opinion, whether it's the curriculum such as CRT that is infiltrating our schools, whether it's the over-sexualization of our children with some of these sex ed programs that are being pushed down our throat, or whether it's the COVID mandates. You need to be activated and you need to stand up and have your voice heard. If you're not a member of this church and you're a member of another church and you want me to come there and speak, please invite me. If you have your own organization of like-minded people and you want me to come out and speak, invite me and I'll come out. It doesn't have to be a big group. I'm happy to share my perspective with you. Stay in touch with me on my website. There's also a mechanism that you can contact me. I answer every email that comes in through my website. There's also a way that you give me your email. I don't sell it. I don't spam you. I don't try to sell you anything. But as I write pieces every few weeks, I send those out on email. Or if there's a media appearance that I did, I'll post those on the email as well. So if you want to know what I'm doing and stay in contact, that's a way to do it. And listen, I'm just so honored to be here and so humbled to be here. And it's a privilege to be able to share my ideas with you. And I appreciate you coming tonight and listening to what we have to say. So thank you.
So, thank you, Jeffrey. Let's all remember to pray for Mary tonight. She has a tough fight on her hands. It's going to turn into a legal battle. And we need to remember that we need to support one another by showing up and speaking up. So thank you tonight for being here, and we appreciate you. And Dr. Barke will meet you out in the foyer tonight. So God bless you all. Thank you, Jeffrey.